Hey guys, good morning. So Miss Catrone here, and today for our listening and learning lesson, we are on Domain 9, which is all about the Civil War, and we are on Lesson 4, titled Abraham Lincoln. So today our lesson is going to be all about learning about Abraham Lincoln, and he was the president during this time. So before we begin, some things that you're going to need are either a journal or something to write with, and a journal, a piece of paper, pencil, something to write on, and something to write with. So I'll give you 30 seconds, go. Alrighty. At any time, you guys can pause the video if you need more time or if you need to hear something again. So before we begin, let's think about something that we already know about Abraham Lincoln, because I think he was covered in first grade of CKLA last year. So if there's anything you know, either turn and tell somebody next to you or write it down. Alrighty, so what we're going to do to start our lesson today, before I read aloud, is we're going to read a poem. And the author of this poem is Nancy Bird Turner. The title of the poem is Lincoln. So we're going to listen to find out what Turner shares about Abraham Lincoln. Let's get started. There was a boy of other days, a quiet, awkward, earnest lad, who trudged long weary miles to get a book on which his heart was set, and then no candle had. He was too poor to buy a lamp, but very wise in woodsman's ways. He gathered seasoned bow and stern, and crisping leaf, and kindled them into a ruddy blaze. Then as he lay full length and read, the firelight flickered on his face, and etched his shadow on the gloom, and made a picture in the room, in the most humble place. A hard years came, a hard years went, but gentle, brave, and strong of will, he met them all, and when today we see his picture face, we say, there's light upon it still. All right, so in the first verse, we hear this. When Lincoln was just a boy, he walked for miles to get a book to read, but had no light to read at night. So he wanted a book, but he didn't have a candle to read his book, so he had no light to be able to see it. The second verse says this. Lincoln made a fire to have light to read by, since he was too poor to buy a lamp. So even though he didn't have money, he was creative in the way that he was able to get light. If we use our kind of English, the third verse says this. The light from the fire cast Lincoln's shadow in the room as he read. That's all it's telling us. The fourth verse says, Lincoln is still remembered today for his character and his accomplishments. Have you guys ever seen Abraham Lincoln's picture anywhere? Maybe you guys have seen the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., a picture of that. Maybe you guys have seen it on a penny or a $5 bill. I actually think I have a $5 bill here. Let's see. All right, there he is. So here we have a picture of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, now we're going to be ready to read our read aloud together, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Alrighty, let's get started. Okay, here we are. So the first picture shows a platform being built. It was a cool October morning in the year 1858 in a town called Alton in Illinois. Workers were putting the finishing touches on a wooden platform in front of a crowd at City Hall. A sharp, cold breeze rustled through the trees, sending showers of crisp red and yellow leaves fluttering through the air. I like that picture it paints in our mind. Two of these men in the crowd were old friends, though they had not seen one another for a long time. One was a farmer. He was dusty after driving his horse and buggy all the way to town on the dirt roads. The other man lived in town. He was dressed in a clean gray suit. All right, that describes kind of the differences between them, that one was dusty from driving his horse and buggy, and the other one was clean in a nice suit. All right, here we have our next picture. Frank and Tom talking. Good to see you, Frank. How's your farm doing? And how was the corn crop this year? Oh, it could have been better. The rains came a little late, but it was good enough, I suppose, Frank said, brushing dust from his jacket. He looked around at the faces in the crowd. You know, Tom, I suppose it has been a lot longer than I thought since I have been to town, because I hardly recognize a single face in this crowd. That's because most of these people are not from around here, Tom said. I was just talking to a man from Kentucky, and I met others who said they had crossed the river from Missouri this morning. It seems odd to me that so many people are so eager to come and listen to two politicians from Illinois. Politicians are a part of government, a group of people who lead the country. Why do you think people are so eager to hear these politicians? Maybe it's because they're talking about a big issue. Remember, the issue during this time is whether or not slavery should be legal or illegal in the country. So they're listening to see what the politicians think about this. This is Mr. Foote speaking to Tom and Frank. There's nothing strange about it, said another man who was standing nearby. Forgive me for interrupting, but I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I'm William Foote, owner of the Daily Pentagraph newspaper out of Bloomington. I'll tell you, gentlemen, these two politicians are going to talk about a problem that impacts our entire country, from here to Boston and all the way to Texas. That is why people come outside Illinois are so interested in what they have to say. What problem do you think these politicians are going to be addressing or talking about? Yeah, probably the issue of slavery. Well, I'll tell you what I think, Mr. Foote, said Tom. The problem is not slavery. The problem is that the government wants to tell people how to live their lives. The fact of the matter is that the people should have the right to decide for themselves whether slavery should be allowed in their state or allowed to expand to new states. We don't need politicians in Washington, D.C. telling us what's best for folks in Missouri and Kansas and Texas or Illinois for that matter. That's not how Mr. Lincoln sees things, said Mr. Foote. Lincoln says that he does not see how the United States can survive if half of the country thinks slavery is wrong and half of the country thinks it is right. Which part of the country thought slavery was wrong? You're right. In the North, they thought that slavery was wrong and they wanted it to be illegal. And which part thought it should be allowed? Yeah, the South. They needed those slaves for their plantations. They thought it should be allowed. We will see about that, said Tom. Our nation and its government have survived since July 4th, 1776, and slavery has been there all along. What important date is is July 4th, 1776? Yep, it's the date that the Declaration of Independence was signed. And we will all be fine as long as the government quits trying to tell everyone how to live their lives. Don't you agree, Frank? So in this scenario, Tom believes that slavery is acceptable. He thinks that people should be able to decide for themselves in their state whether slavery should be allowed or not. And he thinks it should be legal or allowed by law in each person's state. All right, here we have Frank, and he's not so sure. Let's find out why. Frank thought for a moment and rubbed his chin. Honestly, I'm not really sure, Tom. I think this Lincoln fella might have a good point when he says that slavery is tearing our country apart. But what do I know? That is why I've come here today, to try to get a better understanding. Well, you will not be disappointed, said Mr. Foote. I have been to each of these 6 previous debates. Debates is another word for discussion. This one being the 7th and last before the Senate election next month, and I can tell you that you will not find 2 men who disagree more on the issue or problem of whether slavery should be allowed to expand. So these 2 politicians are going to have a discussion or a debate on whether slavery should be allowed or not allowed. We're going to hear what they have to say. All right, so here we have a map of the United States in 1858. Should slavery be allowed to expand to new states? That was the true heart of the debate. In 1858, when he was running for the Senate, Abraham Lincoln said He just wanted to stop slavery from spreading to new areas of the country in the West. In other words, Lincoln did not support abolishing or ending slavery where it already existed in the South. At that time, the United States was made up of the North, where slavery was illegal or not allowed, and the South, where slavery was legal or allowed by law. The United States was just only beginning to grow into a bigger country, spreading west across the Mississippi River. All right, so let's find the Mississippi River on our map. I believe it is this light blue line. Yep, so we have the Mississippi River here. And Lincoln is saying that he doesn't really want to end or abolish slavery in these states where slavery already is, but he just doesn't want it to keep expanding west. Over here, if you are in 2A, we learned about the westward expansion recently. He just doesn't want slavery to keep moving. All righty. That wide and mighty river flowing from Minnesota all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico ran right past the town of Alton. Just across the river was the state of Missouri, which had only been a state since 1821. Slavery was legal in Missouri, as it was in the state nearby, Kentucky, but slavery was illegal in Illinois. There was a lot of land beyond Missouri, but there was not many states, at least not yet. A huge portion of that land was still divided into territories. Territories are regions that were organized by a government of their own, but were not yet a state or states under the national government. The Kansas Territory was one example. Lots of people were moving west to settle in Kansas, and it was on its way to becoming a new state. The people of Kansas would be able to vote on whether or not slavery could expand to their new state. So what's the difference between a state and a territory? Yeah, so they were organized by their own group of people, and they were not yet under the national government. If it's a territory. If it's a state, then they are under the national government. However, the people in Kansas were divided on the issue of slavery. They were so divided, in fact, that the Kansas Territory was known for its severe fighting over whether slavery should be allowed. So it seems like this is a pretty big issue that people cannot agree about. All right, here we have Lincoln standing to debate Douglas. At last, the two candidates is a word for people who are running against each other for a position. Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas appeared on the stage. The crowd applauded and then settled down to listen to the debate. Both men had become rather famous over the past few months, not just in Illinois and surrounding states, but all over the country. The Lincoln-Douglas debates had been covered in newspapers as far away as Boston, New York, and Atlanta. For these two men represented two very different sides of the slavery issue. All right, so here we have Abraham Lincoln. He is this nice tall guy, and here we must have our other candidate, Douglas. Stephen Douglas was a short, plump man and a great speaker. He believed, as did Tom from earlier in the read aloud, that the problem of slavery should be solved by each state and not by the U.S. government. In other words, each state should decide whether to make slavery legal or illegal, and that the U.S. government should not have a say over the issue. Lincoln, on the other hand, thought the U.S. government had a right to prevent the spread of slavery to new parts of the country. The people of the South, especially those who supported slavery, did not like Lincoln for his belief in the power of the U.S. government over the power of the state. They worried that one day the U.S. government might try to tell the South what to do, especially that the government might tell them to abolish slavery. Lincoln had a reputation of being a powerful and highly intelligent man. He was born on a Kentucky farm, but moved to Indiana and then to Illinois, where he was raised in a one-room cabin. Young Lincoln spent his days working on the farm. He only went to school for a year or two as a child. Nevertheless, he became what is known as self-educated. He read everything he could get his hands on, and by the time he was an adult, he had more knowledge than most people had who attended school for many years. Remember in our poem, Lincoln was reading, and he even found a way to create light so he could read in the nighttime. Lincoln eventually taught himself about law, and he became a well-known lawyer in Illinois. Despite his reputation for strength and intelligence and his uncommonly tall, thin body, people were always surprised when Lincoln opened his mouth. Lincoln had a high-pitched, squeaky voice, not the sort of voice people expected to hear, but it was always worthwhile to hear what he had to say. It would be kind of funny to picture a high-pitched, squeaky voice coming out of this tall man. Alrighty. See if I can make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Alrighty. Here we have Lincoln speaking against slavery. What is it that we hold most dear among us? Lincoln asked the crowd that day in Alton. It is our own freedom and wealth. And what has ever threatened our freedom and wealth except this institution of slavery? If it be true, how will we improve things by expanding slavery, by spreading it out and making it bigger? How, Lincoln asked, could America continue to be one united nation if it allowed slavery to spread to the new states? Mr. Foote, the newspaper man, looked around at the faces of the crowd, and he could tell that Lincoln was winning the debate. More people liked what he had to say. Even those who were not against slavery or did not think it was wrong would have had a hard time trying to prove that it was not tearing the country apart. In an earlier speech, Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." In other words, could a country continue when its citizens held such different opinions about what was right and what was wrong? As it turned out, Stephen Douglas was a truly powerful politician. He ended up winning the Senate seat, but Abraham Lincoln had definitely brought attention to himself. These two men met again 2 years later as they both campaigned to become president of the United States. That race had a very different ending. Ooh, if we know that Douglas wins this campaign, and we know that the next race has a very different ending, who do you think wins the next race? Stay tuned to find out. Alrighty, guys, I have some questions for you. So if you haven't yet, please get your pencil and your paper. Alrighty. Question number 1. What kinds of things did Lincoln do as an adult? What was his job? What kind of things did he do? Alrighty, we knew that he was a lawyer and he spoke out against slavery. He debated Douglas for a Senate seat, and he campaigned to become president of the United States. You could have written any of those, that he spoke out against slavery, that he campaigned to become president, that he campaigned against Douglas, and that he was a lawyer. Alrighty, question 2. What did Lincoln do as a child that helped him prepare to be a lawyer and debater? What did Lincoln do a lot of when he was a child that helped him prepare to be a lawyer and a debater? Write down what you're thinking. Yeah, he read so many books that he was considered to have more education or knowledge than someone who went to school for many, many years. They said in our read aloud that he was self-taught. That means that he taught himself what he knew. All right, number 3. Why did people come from several states and territories to hear the Lincoln-Douglas debate? Why did people come from several states or territories to hear the Lincoln-Douglas debate? People wanted to hear their opinions on slavery. We knew that Douglas thought that states should be able to decide what their state rules about slavery, and that Lincoln thought, it really shouldn't expand any farther. So they had 2 different ideas, and people wanted to hear their different ideas. Alrighty. Excuse me. Alrighty, number 4. How did Lincoln feel about slavery? Write it down or tell someone next to you. How did Lincoln feel about slavery? Yeah, he felt that slavery was dividing their nation and he didn't want slavery to be pushed or allowed into the new Western territories that were being discovered. He thought, this is a really big issue and it shouldn't go on anymore. Who did Mr. Foote think had won the debate? When Mr. Foote, the newspaper man, was looking out at the audience, who did he think had won the debate? He thought that Lincoln had won the debate. Yeah, why did he think that? When he was looking around, he thought that more people had agreed with Lincoln that slavery was dividing their country. Good job. All right, next question. What is a politician? What is a politician? Yeah, it's a person who worked in government. Would you guys like to be a politician or no? Write down your answer. Would you want to be a politician or no? I don't think I would. I'm not very good at debating things, so that doesn't really sound very fun to me. Alrighty, so our word work today is the word expand. I'll say it and then you'll say it. Expand. Good job. Expand. In the read aloud, you heard this. People should have the right to decide for themselves whether slavery should be allowed in their state or allowed to expand to new states. To expand means to spread out or become larger. I like to think of the picture of if you're blowing air into a balloon, the balloon is expanding, which means it's getting larger. When you breathe in, your lungs expand to make room for air. Can you think of a time when you have seen or felt something expand? Write down a sentence where you have seen or felt something expand. I just gave you an example. Alrighty. So the next part of our word work activity, we're learning about antonyms. Now, antonym, if you remember, is another word for opposite. So antonyms are the word big and small. They mean the opposite things. An antonym of expand is to shrink. So today I'm going to read you a sentence, and if you think that what's happening is expanding, you're going to give me a thumbs up. If you think it's shrinking, you're going to give me a thumbs down. You can also write these down if that's helpful for you too. Joanna's birthday balloons are starting to lose their air. Joanna's birthday balloons are starting to lose their air. Yeah, that's shrink. If they're losing their air, they're shrinking back down. Billy asked his parents if they would increase his allowance. Billy asked his parents if they would increase his allowance. Yeah, if it's increasing, it's getting bigger or expanding. Sally's blue jeans, fresh out of the dryer, were so tight she had trouble zipping them up. Sally's blue jeans, fresh out of the dryer, were so tight she had trouble zipping them up. Yeah, that's going to be a shrink. When your jeans come out of the dryer and they're really tight, they've shrunk a little bit in the dryer. The amount of snow seems to be less and less every year. The amount of snow seems to be less and less every year. Yeah, that's going to be shrink as well. The amount is going down. Alrighty, guys. For your assignment following this video, you're going to be doing another journal. A journal is a way to kind of write down or explain what you guys have learned. So in this journal, you're going to write 3 sentences and describe the kinds of things that Lincoln did as an adult and how he felt about slavery. So, what did he do as an adult and how did he feel about slavery? We looked at how he was a lawyer. We looked at how he was in a campaign against Douglas to talk about slavery. And we know that he ran for president. So those are some things about what he did as an adult. And we also learned that as far as slavery went, he thought that it should no longer expand in the country because he thought it was dividing their country. So that's what you're going to be writing about, 3 sentences. The form will be right next to this video in your Google Classroom. I hope you enjoyed today's story, and I cannot wait to talk to you guys soon. So have an awesome Tuesday, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. Have a great day.